I love doing podcast interviews, but every time someone tells me to listen to me, I feel so uncomfortable.
Mhm.
I love talking, but then knowing that someone's alone listening to my voice in a dark room is very unsettling.
Oh no, why does it have to be dark?
It could be a
Yeah,
bright room.
yeah. Or outside running or
That too. That sounds better. I
yeah,
could
right?
talk to you while
Yeah,
you like
yeah.
listening to me as you fall asleep. Just sounds, I don't
Awesome.
know.
It sounds
Yeah.
very intimate.
Be sure if you're a listener right now that you're on a run. Otherwise, pause.
Yeah, and go. Pause and go.
On a run,
Running.
cool, cooking is cool. Walks are cool. Just don't listen to this before bed.
Alone in a dark room. Mm-mm. Noted.
Well, thank you for being on our podcast. This is a special little mini series season because we're keeping our episodes short and sweet. So let's dive in and just tell us a little bit about who you are and maybe how your life intersects with rhyme and um, maybe share a little bit about how you were interested in first working with us because it's been a while now. So maybe we can think back to that part of life.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Daniel. I'm born and raised in Chicago. I'm a sports agent by trade. That's my profession, but I'm also a yogi and a meditator and a dreamer, and a lover, and a writer, and anything else I want to be on any given day. Um, and I intersected with RYME because I was in Costa Rica for a ayahuasca retreat, and shortly after that retreat, I spent a few days in Dominical, and I went to a yoga studio to take a class. Well, actually, I'll take a step back. I was staying at a really cool hotel, and the owner of the hotel told me, "Oh, you've been doing yoga. You have to go to this one teacher's class. She's the best teacher. She's my favorite. You have to go to this class." So I went with the owner of the hotel to uh Dinyasa and took a class by Hannah. And the uh class was awesome, but the playlist was spectacular. And the reading of passages from Young Pueblo's book was phenomenal. So afterwards, I had a very emotional practice that day. So afterwards, I went and talked to Hannah to thank her for the class. I think I broke out crying, and we talked for a while, and then we kept in touch, and then kept in touch for a while, and then I got into a few months later, I got into a really busy season of my work where I was extremely stressed. I was overworked, my back was hurting, my neck was hurting, I wasn't sleeping well, and I reached back out to Hannah for help, and we started practicing every day. And almost a year later, we still practice yoga almost every day. Additionally, I went on a private bougie rhyme retreat curated just for me in Portugal, where me and Luz did EMDR, and me and Hannah did hands-on um, yoga, which was my first time experiencing that treat. And I guess we'll probably dive deeper into the specifics of that experience. So I think I'll save the rest of the details for later. So that's my bio and my rhyme intersection experience.
Mhm. Oh, so great. Shout out to Megs over at Tribe for bringing you to
Yeah,
my class at Danyasa. Yeah, thanks so much.
shout out to Meg.
And yeah, thank you. It's such a blessing to hear about the ripple effect of, just a simple yoga class that
Mm.
um, can sometimes leave such an impact. Yeah, so grateful for that. Um, so if you were to think back to that part of your life, you sort of touched on that. Um, you were in a really busy and stressful season with your work, and um, what exactly was going on that you felt maybe that you could use some support in? Like if you could verbalize it and describe it, like what did you feel in your body or in your mind that you were just like, I really need some help with this. I feel stuck in these ways or
Okay, well, what's interesting, actually, I'll before I answer that question directly, I'll take a few steps back before that. Like, I'm a manifester, right? Like I'm like, when I figure out that I want something, I will manifest a way to make it happen. But rarely will I strategize on how. I'll just like set my mind to it and make it happen. So I've probably told you this story before, but the truth is I never really did much yoga. Like I would do a class here and there once when I was like anybody else. Like the intention was like, oh, I'm going to work on my breath, or I'm going to work on my yoga, and then you go to one class, and then you get the free the core power free trial, and then you do two classes, and then you give up. And that was my story. But earlier that year, I had a mushroom journey that I got a very clear message. I had to start doing daily yoga, and I had to start focusing on my breath. Like these were things that were very clear downloads for me. And then I started doing some like YouTube videos, yoga with Adrian, on and off. I was starting to practice, but I knew I needed to take those practices to another level. So it was like setting that intention, sending it out to the universe. Like, I need this, I need to do this. And then the more I practiced on YouTube, it was like getting closer to being ready. And then boom, ayahuasca class at Vinyasa. So it was, in a sense, you could say, oh, it was coincidental, serendipitous, but it was also manifested. It was me showing the universe I was ready to take that next step. And then the universe presenting an opportunity to me saying, hey, here's a teacher, right? It's like the hero's journey, and right, where it's like the universe presents a teacher, and then you with the teacher for an arc, and until you're ready to become the teacher, right? Um, or something like that. I have that book on my bookshelf. I haven't actually read it, but yeah. So it was like I showed the universe I was ready. The teacher was presented, but then even after that wonderful class, we kept in touch. But it wasn't immediate that I was like, all right, let's start daily practice. It wasn't until life started kicking my butt again, and I started intuitively knowing like, okay, I need support, that I was like, oh, I met this teacher. Let me reach out to these people and see if they can support me. And then now that I've grown used to having that daily support or that weekly support or whatever, it's something that's helping prop me up and keep me sustained, because my job is very stressful. I run my body and mind into the ground for periods of time, and I, it's nice to have that support. But I think ultimately the goal is to get to the point where you can remove the training wheels and I can exist in the world in that way anyway, right?
So I have a question about that. Like you said, well, actually, I didn't really reach out right away. So what made you reach out? Like, what was that point in your body or your system that made you feel like now I'm going to change because now I had enough, or now you're at a breaking point, or what was it that you felt like this is the moment I'm going to reach out?
Well, I think the truth to that answer is less poetic than maybe you'd like for it to be. I think that there's two realities to that from as I remember it. One was, I think after that class, I was already trying to convince Hannah to do just daily yoga, and she's like, "That's not part of like the RYME offering. We have retreats, we have these different types of coaching. Like, I don't just do yoga." And I was like, "All right, but I need this help, and I only have this sliver of time every day." So I think I had to beg for a while to convince her. And also the other part was, I during that stretch when I got really busy, it was because work really picked up and I started making a lot more money. So then I had the financial resources to be able to invest in myself, to say, hey, I can, if I'm making this amount of money, I can put 10% of my income towards investing in my mental, physical, and spiritual well-being.
That's a very logical decision, but I'm sure that was also a very spiritual and emotional decision at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's I think the logic of the investment itself comes after the spiritual and emotion,
Yeah.
right? First, you emotionally want something. I really want to start working on these things. Oh, it's going to cost this much money. That's a lot of money. Okay, now let me logically create a reason for why this makes sense. I can convince myself of anything, but I think the logic holds, right? You invest 10% of your income back into your physical, mental, spiritual well-being, and then you'll logically make at least 20% more money the next year if you're really physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, right? Like, I think the logic adds up. Maybe it's not precise math, but
it
I
makes
think
sense to me.
Yeah, sounds good to us. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I totally agree with that, but I cannot back it up with science either. But that doesn't matter, right? And then, all right, fasting forward a little bit, and then you worked with Hannah a lot. Well, like every day, Hannah was convinced, yes, let's do this. She went on traveling, so that worked out too. And then, when did you decide, yes, I'm going to do this retreat? Like, how did that feel for you? And like, why did you do that? Why did you agree to that?
Well, similarly, um, again, like I was going to Europe. I knew I was going to Europe for a stretch, and then I would be hitting up Hannah, being like, "Hey, I might be here, I might be there," and she's like, "Well, we have this retreat at this time and this retreat at this time." And I'd be like, "All right, cool, but like, I won't know until like a week before. Like, I just kind of go with the wind." But then eventually, I was like, "All right, like, let me just invest in like reserving you guys for 2 weeks or for a week. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it to these retreats. I don't want to take up a spot if I'm not gonna come." So for me, again, similarly, it was like uh, an investment in self. And again, that whole math formula that I stated before, if you spend 10% of your income on investing in self, you'll make 20% more the next year. I think by the laws of compound interest, if you continue to make 20% every single year, you'll be a billionaire in like 20 years. So I don't know if that math is precise, but we'll find out. We'll find
We'll
out.
find out.
I'm definitely
Hey, I'm here for it. Yeah.
20% more this year than last year. So we'll keep going. If I'm a billionaire by the time I'm 50, then we'll know. But for me, it was again similar to that. It was like, okay, I don't, my schedule is too insane for me to know if I can reserve a space in one of these retreats, but I really need to take this practice to the next level. I mean, also, you know, I'm an open book. We can say I knew I was going to be doing this coming a month off of a month in Europe, traversing, drinking a lot of wine, eating a lot of food, maybe not being my most disciplined self. So I knew it was going to be perfect to like have a cap on that trip of like resetting my nervous system and resetting my spirit. So like I know myself well enough to know, hey, 5 weeks in Europe of fun times. Let's add a week at the end to like completely reset my nervous system and my spirit to go back into society healed and not depleted.
And what are some of the things that you experienced through those 5 days that we spent together? Like, if you zoom in a bit to remembering the moments, the small moments that were either very informal or maybe a formal modality, right? But what are some of the ways that um, that intention became embodied, right? Like when you worked with us.
Well, one thing, it's funny, I've told you guys this before, but I guess whoever's listening hasn't heard this, was like I came in thinking, okay, there's two activities or things that we're doing, right? There's EMDR, hypnotherapy, and there's yoga. These are the two things we're working on. And then I started to get like a few work calls during the course of the days, and I started feeling guilt that, oh, these two people have built their schedule around me for this week, and I have to step away for work calls. But then as I started to realize that you guys were observing me and using that as um, intel to restructure some of the programming to directly work on the things that you can see, when my breath would speed up when I was on the phone, or I would get just, disheveled, disoriented, or just kind of the ways I handled stress, the way my energies would change, and that you guys are able to observe that, and then, kind of shift some of the programming and some of the practices to be molded specifically to what you felt that I needed, which at first, um, I went from guilt to then appreciation, to realize that there was nothing to feel guilty about, which I think was something that I had to work on as a human in general. Like I often feel guilty. That's why I'm always taking work calls. Because if a client calls me and I can't pick up, I'm like, oh no, I committed to this person. I'm their agent. They count on me. I'm the one person they can count on. I have to take the call. So like I'm riddled with guilt. It's a Jewish thing. Like I'm always guilty, and I always feel bad. And then it's like, here, I'm guilty if I don't take the call. But if I do take the call, I feel guilty because you guys are staring at me while I'm taking the call. But then you guys really put me at ease and said, no, we want to observe you in your natural habitat, right? This is the Daniel Zoo. It's a petting zoo. You're gonna do yoga, you're gonna get pet, and we're gonna observe you. And then we're gonna help, give you some monkey therapy. So I thought that was really cool. And then I also, for the first time there, got to see how the two practices of EMDR and yoga intersect. Um, and how, when you open up the body and you open up your pathways, it actually allows you to be more open to finding traumas in your body and things that need to be released, and then ultimately releasing them on the final day, which I don't want to give away too much to someone who's never been on a retreat before, but it's kind of this build up of interweaving activities that build up to the final day, where you can kind of release and reset.
Mm. And that was the case for you. It happened to be the case for you, but it's actually very personalized and unique because you were on a private retreat. That was your experience. But then on a group retreat, someone might release on day 1, someone might release on day 4, someone might not release until weeks after through RYME coaching. So you had a very beautiful and unique experience, which actually reminds me of on that final day when we did that special modality practice for you, where I was doing hands-on energy work. We opened up the body through some movement and breath. Then Luce came in with an EMDR, and I continued to hold the space energetically. And then we had our dear friend Sebastian, who came in and actually did the soundscape of the music behind the whole experience. It was like a little bit over 2 hours, but that actually inspired us. So spoiler alert, hint hint, teaser for those of you listening, that that 2 hour period where we combined our modalities with Sebastian's soundscape. Daniel, I don't know if you know this, but that's one of the major inspirations for this new product that we're launching next year as well. That will be
Awesome.
Available to all very soon.
Well, I'm so happy because the whole world deserves Sebastian. He's a gift.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit about that experience? I mean, not in detail, but like how you felt necessarily, but more like what the impact was on you afterwards. How that was supportive for your whole journey.
Well, again, it's funny. A lot of I'm looking back, just reflecting now. So much of my story it follows the same patterns. Is um, call to action, skepticism, resistance, follow through, and then help. Where it's like at first with like my call to yoga, at first was like, I think again, going back to that story where like, the mushrooms essentially told me you need to do yoga every day. And the first time I got that call, I didn't do it for a few months, came back to the mushrooms, tried them again, and I got scolded and basically said, "Hey, asshole, we told you to do yoga every day and you're not doing it. So don't you dare come back and ask for more advice until you do what we told you to do." So then I started doing yoga every day. Cool, cool, cool. And then Hannah saying, "Hey, you need to include EMDR, you need to be working on your breath, you need to include these other things." I'm like, the mushrooms told me to do yoga. Like I don't have time for anything else. And then, and then starting to work on these other things, and then the same thing with Sebastian, where initially Hannah said, "Hey, we really want to bring in this musician to work with you." And I'm like, what? I'm going through therapy and I got some stranger playing guitar in my ear. Like, I don't know this guy. What are you talking about? And then I'm fucking crying, and some guys playing the drums in the corner. Like, what do we need this for? And then I end up ultimately thinking about it and trusting my teachers and saying yes. And then the whole experience came together as this wonderful interweaving of body work and energy work and emotional therapeutic, kind of release of my nervous system, and beautiful music that from a really intuitive musician who, again, I don't want people to get jealous if they're not having a private retreat, but was able to like actually feel the releases that were happening in my body and spirit, and have the music almost be a reaction to what I was going through to help me release. It was even that moment where I remember like I had something stuck in my throat, where like I needed to release something from my throat, and he played the throat singing. He was able to like play the throat singing sound to like release the thing from my throat. So it was a wild experience of 3 hours of just I mean, it was like almost like an ayahuasca trip, right? It's like going on a very intense journey through your own consciousness, where you're both, I imagine hypnotherapy being like, oh, like, like a pen, a clock, and then you snap out of it, and 2 hours later you snap back and you're like, what just happened? Oh, you were like, made me balk like a chicken, and do whatever you made me do. But for this, it's like you're conscious, you're aware you're in the room, you're aware of where you're at, you are yourself, but also taking a journey through your subconscious into areas that you normally aren't going to get access to, and kind of cleaning out the cobwebs and finding out what's hiding in those secret rooms.
That's a cool explanation. Huh? Yeah. So you did that, then it was over, you went back to your life. So what did you take with you? Like, how are you now, like, embodying some of these releases, some of like the practices, like the teachings? Like, what is it that it contributed to your life right now?
Well, one thing is, this home that I'm in was a decision that sparked from that last day, that last session, when that whole week on our retreat, I was stressing about where I was going to live, because I had done this Europe trip, and you guys know this, but people listening might, but I'd done this 6-week Europe trip without a place to move afterwards. I didn't know where I was going to live. I was effectively homeless, and I was stressing all week. Like, I was even emailing during the week with a realtor from Chicago about moving there, because that's where I had come from, because I hadn't picked anywhere else. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll just go back there. And then it wasn't until that last session at the very end that I started to get some vision on where I actually wanted to take my geographic location of life, and what I saw as a conducive living situation to my spiritual fulfillment and success. So that, it was like I came into the week without setting. I didn't set. That's what I always think is funny with whether it's with this or with plant medicine or anything else. People like set intentions. Like, you'll go into ayahuasca or mushrooms. People be like, I want to figure out what I'm going to do with my career. And it's like, yeah, sure, the medicine's going to tell you what it wants to tell you. Like, you can have that intention, but like, you're going to learn. It might be, before you learn what you want to do with your career, you have to figure out why you hate your father, and then we'll get to that thing later, right? So for me, it was like I came into that week really just like, I want to take my yoga practice to another level and reset my nervous system from a month of partying across Europe. And then I had this subplot of, where are you going to live, which I didn't think had anything to do with this retreat. And then the final day, literally the day before I was going back to the States, was like, oh, here's your vision that you're going to execute on your not only your geographic location, but the type of living environment you want to cultivate for yourself moving forward for the rest of your life. And additionally, I think there's other things that I didn't think were intentions going in, and I'm so headstrong. I think, oh, this is what I'm here to work on, and then generally it was just other things that like my breath, just like working on my breath while I'm working day to day when I'm getting stressed. I don't find myself getting riled up as much anymore, because I now have tools that I can utilize to, when I feel myself getting worked up, which I think before I still do this some, like getting worked up during work is like a drug a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get angry, I'm gonna fucking yell at somebody, I'm gonna like, ooh, rah, rah, it's like start to get that blood pumping, and then realizing that it's like it is a drug, and it's not healthy, and you're gonna crash from it. And now having daily practices like with my yoga with Hannah, but then also just being conscious of my breath and when to drop into it, and how to reset myself when I need to, which has been a real blessing for me.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And it's so cool to see you a few months later now, like taking this next part of your journey. And that's such a potent part of RYME, where it's like, yeah, like you said, we don't really like do this like intention setting, or even like have a, that's why sometimes we don't even have certain retreats don't even really have a theme, because everyone has a nervous system and everyone has ability to connect to breath. And when you do those things, they're so foundational that whatever clarity you need will come, right? Like if it's clarity in the next step of your business, the clarity in the next step for your relationship or for yourself or whatever it is that you're experiencing, you know, and to have that clarity and alignment is really just about tuning into trust, like going into yourself and trusting your breath and trusting your body. And like, I know through our work together specifically that you do that again and again, like in your day to day as you move into your next season and about to get really busy again, right? You have your
Mhm.
anchors.
Well, I mean, it's getting busier and busier every day now, but I'm already like usually during the basketball season, particularly, once the travel starts to pick up, I start to self-destruct into all my good habits go out the window. It's like this cycle I've been through every year. Springtime, summer, I start to build really good habits, and then by the fall, I'm rolling, and then the winter comes, and I start traveling a lot for the basketball season, and all my habits fall apart, and then by the spring, I've just been destroyed, and then I start the cycle over again. But we're now in December, so I'm farther along than I have been in any other year as far as not self-destructing, like as far as keeping my health and my habits going. Now that this is, I've had a few trips. Tomorrow, I'm actually leaving at 5 a.m. tomorrow. My first big test, a 10-day 5-city work trip, which is going to be really intense, high focus. And it's like, can we continue maintaining this balance and equilibrium, which is not easy, but it's like we've already gone farther than we have before. So the proof is in the pudding. But
Mhm.
but this will be a test. And it's funny, I booked my flight for 5 a.m. tomorrow. I have to be up at 3, which again, it's like I have that tendency to run myself into the ground and just make these ridiculous travel schedules that are just no human can possibly withstand. But that's part of the job, and it takes as much challenge as there is on the job side. You have to have that much discipline and focus on the personal, the spiritual, the physical side. And again, that's why the investment is worth it. Where it's like if I'm gonna do 10 cities, or 10 days, 5 cities, and 5 a.m. flights and red eyes and whatever, because I want to make X amount of dollars. Well, you need to invest X amount of dollars to make sure your body doesn't, take a year off of your life doing that your body doesn't
Mhm.
self-destruct, capable of actually seeing that through. And you can't just like pump yourself up with drugs or whatever. You need to do it in a sustainable way. So I
Mm.
forgot what the question was, but that's my answer.
Well, that's
Yeah,
good actually. Because my last question was, what would you
I have
say
a
to
new
someone
question for
listening?
you. Oh,
Oh,
Hmm?
oh.
yeah, no, go for it.
Well, my
Go
last
for it.
question was, what would you say to someone listening about like how to take a step into something that they're maybe having trouble with trusting? And you kind of answered it there, right? Of just doing what you can and micro steps um and celebrating, progress and not perfection, right? So just we work on that a lot, right? Like where can you just weave in ease? It's not necessarily about like taking this huge crazy step or doing this big crazy thing or moving or starting a new job. It's just where are you now and what can you do to create more ease? And that's something that we do a lot, I feel like, when we work with you. But yeah, Luz, what was your additional question?
I mean, it is some sort of a build up, like what you said. It's like you said you had some resistance, right? Like you always have this, like first this idea comes and you say no. So now experiencing this whole year, you experienced it and it's past. And like what would you tell your previous self and maybe someone who's listening, right, who has similar challenges? What would you tell them and yourself back then when you felt like that resistance? Like, what would you tell your old self and the one who's listening what to do or
Well,
what to follow?
I think it was interesting. I think a lot of my resistance is rooted in as my job as a sports agent, I have to filter opportunities for other people. So my
Mm,
natural state is skepticism
mhm,
because I have to protect my clients from being taken advantage of or getting bad investments, bad opportunities. So I always start from a baseline of skepticism, and then whatever the thing is has to prove itself to me, right? And I would say what is beautiful about me, though, is that I do give the opportunity for something to prove itself. I start with a baseline of skepticism,
Mhm.
but I'm always open-minded for that skepticism to change. I'm
Mhm.
not rigid in my belief systems. Like,
Mhm.
take like plant medicine, which is different than what you guys do, but something that's important to me. I often will talk to people that have preconceived ideas of exactly what it is and why they don't need that and why it's not for them. It's like, cool, good luck thinking that way. You decide something that you've never done or experience is not for you. Have fun with that, right? But for me, it's like I start with the baseline of skepticism, but then I always am open-minded for something to prove itself to be worth it for me. And I will try anything once or twice or three times. So I would encourage anyone listening to like begin with an open mind and anything in your life. Give it a chance. And then be critical in evaluating if is it right for you? Because a lot of people get wrapped up in, buying consumer, like I see a lot of like consumer products in the wellness space that seem like pseudoscience, seem like they're nonsense, but you convince yourself that it works, or you're taking a supplement that you're convincing yourself that it works. You don't know if it works. And then I think people don't listen enough to like, how do I feel before? How do I feel after? Is my body and spirit responding to this well, or am I reacting to someone telling me this is good or bad for me? So I'd
Mhm.
encourage anyone listening to this is just like begin with an open mind, try anything, and then listen to your body and spirit. Is this helping you? Are you having a positive reaction? If it is, fucking roll with it.
Mhm.
And if not, let it go.